Hello everyone, welcome to a video about a Stochelo Rosenberg solo on a tune that he wrote himself called JEU. And even if you don't recognize the title of this tune, I'm sure that you've heard it because it's one of Stochelo Rosenberg's most popular compositions. It's often played at jam sessions. He often plays it himself in concert sets, and it's a really fun tune to perform, to play in jam sessions and to improvise over. But it is a difficult tune, and that's because of the time signature. It is a 6/8 time signature, and that's not a time signature you often encounter in gypsy jazz, or even in jazz. And it's a serious challenge to most improvisers to play a fluent, coherent solo. So what is the best way to come to grips with a challenge like that? That is, of course, transcribing great solos. And maybe the greatest improviser on this kind of rhythm is Stochelo himself. So let's dive into two choruses of a solo he played on JEU. So before we dive into the first phrase, there's a little secret that you should know or realize about this time signature. Even though it's 6/8, and the reason it's 6/8 is because there are 6 beats in a bar. Because you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's what the rhythm guitar plays. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with an accent on the 1 and the 4. So you get a 2-beat feel. 1, 2, 1, 2. Even though it's that time feel, you could also divide those 6 beats into 3 groups of 2. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it resembles a waltz, because then you would get a 3-beat feel. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Let's say I would play rhythm and I would interchange every 2 bars between those 2 feels. Then it would sound like this. So you can see the rhythm continues, the tempo continues, but the feel is different. Now Stochelo's trick is to think of this 6/8 as a waltz. So all his lines make a lot of sense if you think about the bar in 3 parts instead of 2. And it also makes it much easier to improvise over because, of course, playing a waltz in gypsy jazz is quite normal and we're used to that feel. So now you get this effect of superimposing waltz phrases on top of this 6/8 rhythm. And that is actually a very appealing effect because even though the lines in Stochelo's head might be waltz lines, you actually hear them as sophisticated 6/8 lines. Now there's some phrases that Stochelo really goes into the 6/8 feel. It doesn't really happen in the first chorus, it happens in the second chorus, which we will get to in another video. But for this first chorus, we can actually look at all the lines as waltz lines. And we actually have to, because there are some triplets in there. And if you would think about a triplet, so that means a quarter note divided into 3 parts, on top of a 6/8 rhythm, it becomes very complicated. It's almost impossible to play that. So if you in your head think a waltz, then it becomes manageable, becomes easy even. And then the rhythm guitar stays in this 6/8 rhythm. You get this really very complicated sounding, sophisticated, rhythmic tapestry. But as a solo player, we just think a waltz and then it's not that difficult. So let's look at the first phrase. So immediately for this first phrase, we just think of a waltz. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So this second part starts on beat 2 of a waltz rhythm. If we think of it in 6/8, it would start right before this for the 2-beat feel. I like 1 and 2, 1. So then the C becomes the accented note because we get 1 da da ba da ba da ba dum. But because we think in waltz, actually the B becomes the most important note. 1, 2, 3, 1. And because we're thinking of walls, we can play those triplets without any problems. If we would be thinking about a 6/8, it would be impossible to time this. It would become very difficult. So it's always important to keep that 3-beat feel in our head. Even though that might be difficult in the beginning, right? Because the accompaniment is playing. So immediately you have to think 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1. But it's a challenge still, because you might get distracted by the rhythm section. So what I would suggest is record a backing track for it very slowly, or there might be some on YouTube. Or you could put your metronome in 8th notes, if you can do that, and put an accent or a different sounding beat on beat 1 and 4, but still force yourself to think 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now about the harmony of this line, it's quite clear. There's nothing weird about it. It's very clearly outlining the harmony. Now notice that the harmony of the A part of JEU is the same as the harmony as the A part of Bossa Dorado. Of course, it's another rhythm, but it's the same chords, right? Like we get the 1 chord minor, then we get the 2 chord, but as a dominant, so F sharp 7. If we would play Bossa Dorado in E minor, which is the original key, by the way, it's the same chords: E minor, F sharp 7, and now we get it as this 6/8 rhythm. And then a 2/5 to E minor, and the line here we get this A sharp diminished or B flat diminished, which of course is a logical choice to play on F sharp 7 because it's just a diminished arpeggio from the 3rd. And then this line is a typical line for E minor. So on top of that 2-5-1 to E minor, Stochelo just thinks a line in E minor. And then B7. He stays on this B7 sound on that E minor, the 2nd A. And that is actually a really common strategy in gypsy jazz. That if you have a minor chord, you think about the 5 and you just keep playing lines that fit the 5 chord, and it will sound really great on the 1 chord. So if you play, let's say, Joseph Joseph, where you have A minor for 6 bars, you just mix your E7 lines with A minor right on top of that A minor chord. And it will make perfect sense. So that's what Stochelo is doing here. He's just thinking in B7. Now stay on B7 even though the chord is E minor. And then we get the same line for F sharp 7. And then we arrive at phrase number 2. But before we talk about that phrase, I want to highlight our sponsor for today, which is my book, The Van-Hemert System. It's a book I wrote during the pandemic, or right before the pandemic, but it got released in the pandemic, about how to learn how to play jazz guitar at a high level. If you're interested in the book, you can order it from different places. That info will be in the description. And I made a commercial for the book last year, and I'm gonna play it right now for you. And right after the commercial, we will continue with the second phrase of the JEU solo. Hello everyone, you just listened to a jazz guitar solo on the chords of the tune Argentine. If you are a guitar player and you always wanted to play jazz but had no idea where to start, I have a solution for you. I just released a book called The Van-Hemert System, which describes the system I used myself to learn how to improvise, like you just heard. The methodology is completely based on learning a couple of shapes across the guitar neck that will enable you to improvise on every jazz standard you can think of. Of course, it's gonna take a while to become proficient at playing those shapes and how to apply them, but you don't have to learn anything else. No music theory, no scales, no arpeggios, no fretboard identification, no ear training, just learning those shapes and how to apply them. That's what I did myself, and you just saw the result. If you are interested in learning to play jazz guitar like that, and you are in the US, order my book in the web store of jungleguitars.com. And if you are in Europe, send a mail to this email address. Bye! So I divided the solo into phrases, but in fact, one phrase is several phrases. But I didn't want to cut the solo into very small pieces. So the second phrase is a couple of phrases. The first one, same tactic as in the first A. On the 2-5-1 to E minor, Stochelo just plays a line for E minor. He goes chromatically here with the triplets to land on E7, which will lead him into the bridge. And now we basically get the changes to autumn leaves, so like 2, 5, 1 in G, 4, and then a 2, 5, 1 back to E minor. And Stochelo plays some really smart lines, so this is E7, and now we get the 2, 5, 1. That's a line for A minor, just typical A minor lines. Jumping to this G major line. So he's not playing any D7, right? He just goes in his head from A minor to G major 7, which is a thing you could always do on a 2-5-1. You don't have to play the 5. You can stay on the 2 chord. In fact, that's a really nice sound. G major 7 line. He stays on that G major 7 line even though the chord changes to C major, which is something that is also very common to do on autumn leaves. That 4 chord, you don't have to really play it. You can still play the 1 chord. So here's a major 7 arpeggio, G major 7. On top of C, you get the 5th, the major 7, the 9, and the F sharp would be a C major 7 sharp 11 sound. That sound. But it doesn't really matter, you just think about the 2-5-1 and G, and that C, you leave for the rhythm section, you just keep playing the G. Now, one thing to notice about this line is that it is very difficult to play. And that is because of Stochelo's picking patterns with all the double downstrokes. So it starts with a triplet. Again, we're thinking about the waltz, right? So 1, 2, 3, 1. And we get these triplets. It's already not very comfortable. And then here we get 3 downstrokes in a row, 2 downstrokes in a row, 3 in a row again. I promise you, if you try this, it is just very difficult to play. And even if you would alternate, it's still not very comfortable. It's just unwieldy. And if you hear Stochelo play it, and I will put a link to the original recording in the description, it sounds very easy. But in fact, it isn't. I would never play these lines like this. I would alter them slightly, same idea maybe, but I would alter them slightly to get some more alternate picking inside of the lines. And those lines might even sound harmonically more interesting because there will be more chromatics or some other enclosures. And you might even think that those lines are more complicated to play, but they aren't. The most difficult lines to play are always the lines that Stochelo plays. It's just because of the picking. So it's a real challenge to play it like Stochelo, but I think it's a good challenge. It's good for your picking to try that. And then when you play your own solo, you can just play more chromatically. Right, you play stuff like that, which are also great lines, but they're much easier to play because of the easier picking patterns. Let's go to the next phrase. So this phrase starts with what I call a chromatic trick. It's where you want to move your hand from one place of the guitar to another place. And Stochelo wants to go from here to this D sharp so he can play a nice line for E7. So he uses this chromatic scale with embellishments, which makes it sound very appealing. But it is a trick. It is a chromatic trick. Now he has to jump to land on the G sharp on time. And now we get this scalar, typical Stochelo line. It's just a scalar line for G major. It's a line that he plays more often on 251s. For instance, in For Sephora, his famous solo, there's a line like this. It sounds great, and it's not really outlining a 251 with alterations or with a line that goes from the third of A minor to the third of D7, but it is a really appealing line, and it's very appealing in this solo because a lot of it is arpeggio based, but now we get a scale, just a G major scale with the lead tone here. And then he has to go to F sharp 7, so he wants to land on an A sharp on beat 1, so he just repeats the B a couple of times. There's a couple of embellishments, grace notes. I think in the video I play only one at the end, but Stochelo, I believe, plays two. Like that, so do whatever you want there. But he's waiting to land on that A sharp for the F sharp 7. That's a beautiful line. So we get F sharp 7 outlined by playing an A sharp diminished. And then this great line for B7 lands on the root of E minor, so we can start the next chorus with his iconic. We'll talk about that line in the next video. Now, this line is very challenging to play. The whole thing is difficult to play. Again, think about the walls, right? So 1, 2, 3. I would take it slowly with the metronome, maybe even put the metronome in a waltz, like 1, 2, 3, da, 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 and then practice the line slowly. And then when you've got it in your fingers, change the metronome to reflect a 6/8. So, so you're going from to and then you force your waltz lines on top of it. If you can make it work with the metronome in 6/8 while you are playing these waltz lines, and you can make it fit, then you've cracked the code. But it's gonna take some time. It took some time for me. I really had to practice that to get it into my fingers, but now I got it. And it opened up an avenue for me to improvise on double jeu that I didn't have before. Before I was always thinking about the 6/8. But now I changed my thinking to a waltz. And actually it is Stochelo who opened up my eyes to that. He told me, like, he thinks of it as a waltz, even though it's a 6/8. But he thinks of it as a waltz, makes it much easier for him to improvise on it. And the added benefit is that it actually makes it more appealing, the lines, because they're unexpected. Something to think about, something to try yourself. Even if you don't play these lines, think about the waltz and improvise right on top of this 6/8 rhythm. That was it for this video. Of course, there's a second chorus, and I'm gonna make a video later this week, especially for my patrons over at patreon.com. You can check out that site. And if you join there for the lowest tier, you can download the tab that you saw on screen today. But then I'll make another video for the second tier, the €10 tier. And I will make a video just like this about the second chorus with playing tips and maybe some theoretical exploration of the lines. And then, of course, you can download the complete solo on that tier. So check out my Patreon, and if not, you can also just check out the videos on YouTube. There are also many of those. If you like the video, please give it a like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to keep notified of new videos, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!